Hi and welcome into this video, and today I'm going to show you how you can play the Jobava London System. So I recently made a video about how to crush the Jobava London System, where I recommended knight c6 and after bishop f4 this crazy gambit e5, and it's very fun to play for black. So at the end, if you're interested what to do against it, you have to watch the video until the end. There I will show you what to do against it. So most of your opponents will play knight f6, and now this is the beginning of the Jobava London System. So what are the typical ideas or points behind this? So you're often ready. So this is kind of like a London system. You put your pawn to e3, but your knight is more active on c3. Of course, the downside is now you can't move the c pawn, so your queen can't interact like this. But you're not, as I said, your knight is more active, and it's often ready to jump to b5, where it hits the c7 pawn, which threatens the fork. So and also this is a very aggressive opening. So if you are an aggressive player or want to learn an aggressive opening, this is definitely the right opening for you. So now we look at three moves: e6, which is the most common move, and also at c5 and bishop to f5. So let's start things off by c5. Now there are two moves, e3 and e4, but let's just keep things simple. You stick to your typical Jobava London setup, just like the London, but with the knight on c3, and after they go knight c6, you win the game on the spot. And that's why you should play the Jobava London System. Now they can't do anything about this fork. I mean, they could play e5, but you could take with the pawn, but even stronger is taking with the bishop. After they take, you recapture, and this is actually quite nice because, for example, if they move a knight, you've got this tactic. Pause the video if you want to solve it. Queen takes d5. So you can't go knight c7 check because the queen controls the square, but now you go queen takes d5, a very typical motive. And now you fork the king and the queen, and for example, if they move like this, you're up 2 pawns in an endgame, and you should be easily winning. Also, this knight is a bit awkwardly placed, and for example, you could potentially play f4 and just trap this knight. Yeah, so that's if they play knight c6, which loses on the spot. So they could trade and then play knight c6, but it doesn't really change anything. So and you still take like this, and the same tactic again. If they give a check, it can just block. So the best way to play is to prevent this knight b5 stuff. And now you can just develop your knight, and for example, you don't have to be worried about this pin because you can just attack the bishop. For example, if they retreat, you just take over completely. So most of your opponents will probably just develop the knight. And now here comes a very important move to remember: knight to e5. And yeah, and your knight stays very active on e5, it's very well defended. Of course you move the piece twice, but you open up the line for your queen, which is very important because after bishop f5, you can play g4, hitting this bishop. And for example, if the bishop goes back, if they take, you can take like this back, and if they take, you have to move f3, and now black has very serious problems. They could try to counter your bishop, but now you just take and attack this knight, and for example, you can give this check, and if they go b5, not sacrificing a bishop, but boom, and after they take, they're just losing their queen. So that's not very good for black. So they can try to retreat to g6, which looks very logical. But remember this motive: putting knight to e5, then going g5 and then h4. Very typical motive, not only seen in the Jobava London system, but also, for example, in the Scandinavian defense. And now they can't move this f pawn to try to give some space for the bishop, because then you can just take and go g5 and you're just completely dominating the game. Yeah, what can they do? I mean, there's not really much they can do. They can try to counter, but it doesn't change really much. You can do like this, and if they give a check, you defend the knight, and black is left with kind of the same problems. And now, you don't have to remember this, but just remember your position is very good. So this was a sample line. Probably a bit too long, but again, you don't have to remember this. So if they go c5, you just play e3, and keep in mind this knight b5 motive whenever they play knight c6, so they don't have knight a6 anymore to try to defend this c7 square. So they could also try to bring out the bishop to f5, and now remember this, knight on f6, bishop on f5, and now you haven't put your knight on f3, so you can play f3 and just try to play g4, and that's why you play the Jobava London system. So for example, if they go e6, you play g4, and now you could play h4, but you can also just play queen d2, and you can play h4 whenever you want. So for example, if they play bishop d6, you can just castle, and if a position like this arises, it's just very pleasant. The queen is active, your knight is active, your king is perfectly safe, and you've got more space on the king side. And if the black king ever castles here, this looks really dangerous. So they could try to change queens. Now, if they take, you can recapture this, they can defend like this, but you go knight h3, defend this queen, and you've got a very pleasant ending like this with h4 ideas. So, and they can also play e6, which might be the most critical try. Black's idea is to play bishop b4 and just pin his knight, and maybe even trade it off or play c5. So here you should play knight b5, attacking this pawn, but they can counter with knight a6, they can defend this, but this knight is very passive and awkwardly placed. Often they just have to go to b8, as you will see. Now you go e3, now your knight is also defended, and it might be that your knight has to retreat, but now you threaten to take this knight and damage a pawn structure. So one of the best moves is to play knight b8 in this position. But just let's say they play something like bishop d6, then you just take, and now a very instructive move you could take. You can also play knight e4, not worried about this damage of a pawn structure, because the knight is getting to c5, sorry, and again you defend this knight, and your position is very good. So just remember, if they play c5, you go e3, knight c6, b5, knight b5, you win on the spot. If they go bishop f5, then you go f3, e6, g4, followed by queen d2 and castle and queenside. And if they go e6, then you should play knight b5 and go e3. And whenever they kick your knight back, you can then retreat and threaten to take this pawn, this knight. And if they retreat and want to play this, you can just prevent this, and your position is very promising. You've all got some g4 ideas, which is also very typical for the Jobava London system. So c5, e3, bishop f5, f3, and e6, knight b5. So at the end, I will show you what to do against knight c6 with the idea to meet bishop f4 with e5. And to be honest, I haven't found any refutation of this concept, and even if white plays the top engine lines, this position can be very tricky. So I recommend you to play a very nice move, knight f3, and now you just stop this e5 idea completely, and next you want to play bishop f4. Of course you can't move your f pawn anymore, but this knight is also not perfectly placed. I mean, ours. is also not perfectly placed, but we move fast and we also have some ideas like this. So this was all about the Jobava London system. I hope you enjoyed this video. See you in the next video.